time for the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they come in. As usual, we'll begin with our sister publication This Day. On its front page this morning, unprecedented offensive to tame inflation. CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, raises its monetary policy rate to 22.75% from 18.75%. The governor of the bank, Cardoso, also says Apex Bank has settled additional $400 million verified FX backlogs. Also says unidentified users access $26 billion on Binance Nigeria platform. Declares market distortions undervalued Naira and vows punishment for culprits. Meanwhile, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, MAN, urges Apex Bank to adopt managed float exchange rate system. Leading photo you're seeing there is the presentation of certificate of return to Ighodalo as the PDP Guber flag bearer in Edo State. More headlines from This Day this morning. After relative success at day one of nationwide protest, Nigeria Labour Congress suspends rallies. And at the top there, Tinubu decision to remove a petrol subsidy, challenging but necessary. That's This Day.
All right, let's look at what the Punch is saying on its front page. It says, presidency is alleging that there's a political agenda as protests hit the state. That's for the Punch newspaper.
Other papers this morning, we have the Leadership. Hardship, Labour protests ground states. NLC has now suspended that protest. They've given fresh 14-day ultimatum. That's the Leadership.
Right, let's look at a Sports Punch Extra and see what they've got on their front page. Olympic dream, of course. Nigeria beat Cameroon the other day. Let's go to the next paper. All right, let's look at Business Day. I was going to go to Vanguard. Naira strengthens as CBN moves to stabilize economy, raises MPR to 22.75%, CRR to 45%, and the dark side of the Abapa project. You'd like to pick that up and read it. The dark side of the Abapa project.
All right, staying on those protests, the New Telegraph, its front page this morning, hardship protests, restore industrial hubs, palliatives to farmers, fix refineries. These are some of the issues the NLC is bringing to the federal government. Also, Senate proposes 6-year single term for the central bank governor. That's the New Telegraph.
All right, the Vanguard, okay. NRC gives 17-point demand to Tinubu, suspends protest that will gladden the hearts of the federal government, the suspension of the protest.
All right, let's take some international papers this morning. The Financial Times, just starting from the top there, from Ukraine allies, Berlin rejects sending forces. This is as Emmanuel Macron is enjoining other European countries to send forces to Ukraine. Now, Thames Water pushes for higher bills, lower fines, and right to pay dividends. Meanwhile, McKinsey website touted its advice to China's ministries despite later denials.
Daily Express. Let's see what the Daily Express is saying. Otherwise, if we can go to Labour yet to convince 40% of target voters new poll finds. That's for the I. And let's look at let's bring in Dr. Constance Ikoku, Arise News analyst and current affairs commentator. Glad to have you join us this morning on Daybreak.
Good morning, indeed.
Good morning to you. Like we'll tell you, we're coming
Good
live.
to be in the studio. It's better in here.
It's better in the studio.
Yes.
Great.
Sometimes things don't remain the same. You could say today is Christmas.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at let's start maybe with the Vanguard. Then we'll go to our sister publication. And also give 17-point demand to Tinubu and is suspending the protest. A while ago, myself and Okechi were discussing this issue, that what the Labour seems to want is something that can touch them, something saying that they've achieved 80%, fine and good, but it's hanging in the air. They want something like maybe transportation costs, reduce foods, reduce, they can feel, they can touch, but they are suspending their protest and giving the presidency, the federal government 17-point agenda. What do you make of it?
Well, obviously they've given the government a breather. And when we played the clip earlier, the NLC leader, Joe Ajero, was making the case that 30,000 naira pay is not a living wage in Nigeria, especially in this economy.
And some state governments are not even paying.
Exactly. He has a point there. And I think a lot of Nigerian workers will agree with him. The protest seemed relatively successful. It did fail in some states. And generally, when you look at the Labour family, it seems to be a little bit disunited. The Trade Union Congress had declined to join the protest. And so workers are feeling like their Labour family is not together as it used to be. There are allegations of compromise, and that poses a problem and presents Labour as weak. So in order for Labour to be able to fight for the workers and get what they want, there has to be a united front, and they have to be committed to their demands. So they have given the government another, is it 14 days?
7.
Is it 7
okay.
or 14? Well,
14 days or
14 days.
14 days.
I was actually
warning.
talking about the point.
Yes, 14 days warning again. So let's see what happens. They would go into talks again as usual, and we'll watch and see.
I like that you said as usual. They're always going into talks, and hours before the protest, there's always a last-minute meeting or
they shouldn't really
something
be so. I think it's
like
something that the talk should go on, not just fire brigade.
Yes,
Yeah.
they have perfected this art of going back and forth. So let's see.
Let's see what happens. Let's go to the New Telegraph, Dr. Ajaokuta. There's something the Senate is proposing, a 6-year single term for the Central Bank of Nigeria's, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. They're also proposing that, look, if you want to change legal tender in Nigeria, you have to give 1 year notice. What are your thoughts on this proposals from the Senate? And also, you can speak about the MPC meeting yesterday, first one of 2024, increasing interest rate to 22.75%.
Well, this is an interesting topic. The CBN position has been very controversial over some years. I think during President Olusegun Obasanjo's tenure was when the CBN governor did a relatively good job and was given the independence. The CBN is supposed to be an independent institution from the executive arm of government. In democracies that are weak, what you see is an constant intervention to get them to make decisions and monetary policies the way that suits the executive arm of government or the president specifically. So we have seen a weakened CBN over the years. I think it started from Jonathan's, tenure. Okay, there was a bit of independence, but then Sanusi got into a little bit of politics. He was fired, and then we came into President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, and everything went south. Godwin Emefiele, the CBN then, must have been one of the most controversial CBN governors in Nigeria. Why? Because a lot of people believe that he really toed the line that the president wanted and did a lot of things that were outside the book and that were very unprofessional of a CBN. So now proposing the 6-year tenure, what the Senate is saying is that if there is a single tenure or single term, it will reduce the political influence on that institution. We definitely need a clean, independent institution. However we can get that done, remove them from under the wings of the president, I think the country needs to do that.
All right, let's look then at the Punch. Has an interesting story on its front page. The presidency is alleging that what is happening with the process hitting the states is a political agenda. The point is that end people suffering from high cost of living in terms of school, rent, food. And then if it's a political agenda, what do you do? Is it not to maybe satisfy, if you like, labor and then kill the political agenda? What do you make of that?
Very good questions that you have raised, Ndi. We have seen this kind of political talk in Nigeria very frequently. I mean, sensible people will say that this kind of utterances do not help the country. It doesn't help anybody. You know, the situation is in front of our eyes. You can see day by day what people are going through. Why does government exist? Government exists to solve problems. If you cannot solve problems, then there is no need being in power. So I think Nigerians at this point are more interested in a government that is able to sit down and produce results. I think that's what is, you know, uppermost in everyone's mind.
And not to tell him about politics. I
mean, if the government, if the opposition has a political agenda, the government itself also has a political agenda, but that agenda should be in the interest of the people that voted them into office.
Dr. Constance, I know there's one story on the New Telegraph. It's also on The Guardian that you wanted to touch on. The Senate probing some monies regarding the Ajaokuta still. I think it's about 496, almost $500 million payment. They're probing the Ajaokuta Steel Company. What are your thoughts on that development?
Yes, $496 million. So Ajaokuta has been a vexed topic, you know, for a very long time in this country. The idea of the company was mooted in the 70s to make Nigeria a leading exporter of steel. That never happened. And the most disastrous thing about Ajaokuta is that so much money has been pumped into this project, and it looks like it's going down the drain, or it has gone down the drain. It is a classic case of an elephant project. A white elephant project. And so this time around, the Senate is trying to probe it. Every government ever has always reopened the books and tried to probe Ajaokuta Steel and to see why it has not worked. The probe now, or the investigations, I think is being led by one of the senators from that state, Kogi State, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. She says that investigations are necessary to uncover, you know, the issues. She said that as at 1994, when the project was already at 98% completion, the company in charge exited and a lot happened. So they want to uncover and see what's going on there. Many would say maybe it's time to put a lid on Ajaokuta instead of continuing to pour money into it if we are not ready to do the right thing. I mean, it's a clear indication of government and inefficiency and a total collapse of the system.
98%, and you couldn't continue?
Yes. It's staggering news.
And Keshi will take this day.
All right, our sister publication this day. I want to focus on the leading photo on our sister publication this morning. Edo State election, Dr. Ikoku. That's the presentation of certificate of return to Ighodalo as the PDP Guba flag bearer. We've had, I mean, they had what they, I don't know if I'll call it a parallel primaries as well. APC, there are people protesting their own primaries results. Labour parties having their own issues in Edo State. What are your thoughts going forward? We're expecting that election in September.
Well, we've seen these issues again and again. A lot of irresponsibility within parties. They're able to manage themselves. There's lack of cohesion. Sometimes things are not done properly, and that is why we see what happened in Edo State. There is time between now and September for them to iron out whatever issues they have. Last night we discussed it, talking about alliances and mending fences, and, you know, really urging politicians to behave more seemly than what is currently going on. So we'll watch and see, you know, how the story evolves or develops before September, if they're able to get it together.
All right, let's look at the international paper. Let's look at the I saying that Labour yet to convince 40% of target voters. That's what the new poll is finding. What does that say for Labour's chances?
Well, they have a lot of work to do, obviously, from that story. The UK has been facing a lot of crisis, and from discussing and talking with people, you see that a lot of citizens are fed up. Over the years, there have been crises from the way that the Conservatives have managed the country under David Cameron, who led them to the Brexit, and then what's the next Prime Minister? What was his name? The one with blonde hair, Boris Johnson. And then we had the COVID crisis where people felt that it wasn't managed properly. And then you have the energy crisis that has also hit the whole of Europe, arising from the war in Ukraine. So people are going through a lot of difficult times and are thinking maybe we should try another party. But Labour has the chances to win this election. It depends on how they are able to manage it. The elections are going to be held either the end of this year or latest by January 2025. There is time for them to do the work that needs to be done to let voters know that they are ready to take over from the Conservatives.
Always a pleasure, Dr. Ajaokuta, journalist, political commentator, and a Rise News analyst. Thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning on Daybreak.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the studio. I love being in the studio.
You love the studio.